Jackson Podcast.
Man, thank everybody for checking out the playlist, for purchasing the book. If you have purchased the book, The Divorce Man, the link will be in the description. We've been having great conversation. We're currently on chapter 5, the Playbook, and I'm excited to have a conversation with Eric about this. How has your Sunday been today, Eric?
My Sunday has been quite nice.
Yes, sir.
I am hoping for spring to get here early, and I'm enjoying what seems to be a very interesting starting of the month of March, but I am looking for warmer weather.
Yeah, the weather has changed drastically a little bit as of recently, though, especially in the South. It's been 70 degrees almost every day. Then it'll be 20 degrees by the nighttime, but
yeah,
it's a good thing, though, man. Springtime, I hope it comes early also, though, man. And just checking out your book, man. This Playbook chapter, you gave me a heads up on it, but I think the playtime is over with now. That's my perception. The playtime is over with. It's time to embrace that the divorce has happened. It's time to move on, move forward, and playtime is over. That's just that's what I received from chapter 5 from my perspective, though. But let's get into the conversation, though, Eric. Like, tell me how important narratives is and the perception of men. Just creating a narrative.
That's a great setup.
Mm-hmm.
If you have been paying attention, and I think chapter 5 is the first where I actually talk about the wife narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I specifically chose the term wife narrative because the wife narrative is one of the most effective weapons to be used against you to frame who you are, to validate who you are, and to set the stage for other actions down the road. And the wife narrative, now notice my words I'm using. The wife narrative is what sets everything up to get the actual divorce started, implemented, and moving.
So the perception is being created before the thought of divorce even exists.
Yes, it is created. It's established. It has been validated.
So,
however, it doesn't come into play until we get to this stage.
It coming into play, right? So,
yes, sir.
I'm trying to slow walk it into the conversation, but the narrative that's being created is who you are as a man, what I will accept you as, your faults, your good, your bad. It's just in totality, how does she even obtain that power to be able to create a narrative of who you are, to define, like it's basically defining you to the public?
If you remember from last week's episode, I used the term the burden of divorce.
Mm-hmm.
The burden of divorce predates you, your actions, your behavior. It has nothing to do with you, but everything to do with you. Because there is a narrative within our country that men are this, women are this, women are free from societal accountability. Men are responsible for harm, for abuse, for sexual abuse, for work harassment. We're responsible for those things. And again, for the record, those things do happen in the workforce. They do happen in homes. These types of crimes, these types of allegations, they are committed by men. Yes, they are. However, not all men are guilty of this behavior.
That's true.
And because of this, it sets the stage for the wife to have a narrative in defining and validating a man's life.
So even if those things aren't attachments to you, like if you've been doing what you're supposed to do, holding down the household, being a good husband and everything, that whatever people think is a good husband, that perception is still attached to you based upon America's perspective of men and what has been done in the past. That's harsh. And does proving it matter? I'm sorry.
No. It does not matter. Your accolades as a man, your ability to function, to do the things that you and I talk about, to do, and I'm gonna jump ahead just a little, and talk about the 80-20 principle, which is in my new book. I would say 80% of the men are talking about exactly what you and I are talking about. These are the men who are committed. These are the men who are faithful. These are the men who have personal discipline. They have other attributes, other activities outside of the home. They're on point. They go to work. They're responsible. They can be located. We're talking about those guys. Your good deeds that you do, those things do not come up in a divorce.
Wow.
The only thing that matters is what you did not do and how that narrative will be used against you if possible.
So if the 80% of the men is doing what they're supposed to do, that's not going to be spoken louder than what the 20% is doing.
Remember what we talked about. That's when your lawyer, remember I talked about the lawyer. I talked about the value of the lawyer. I talked about the necessity to find a bulldog, an advocate.
Yeah.
That's where the true fight around men's rights, around equitable treatment, that's where we're losing this conversation in the courtroom. And we're losing it with the lawyers because the lawyers refuse to reframe that argument. That argument's not being reframed. Some, perhaps, there's some examples, but generally speaking, that argument is not being reframed. And I'm telling every divorced man that regardless of you're in that 80 or you're 20, whatever category you see yourself in, the things that you and I know that make us men, that define our actions, those things are rarely talked about. They're rarely talked about. Whatever the playbook is used to assess the best move to win, that's what's going to be talked about. And that's what you as a man, you need to get your mind around that angle.
Because when I hear you speak about this, my mind goes to what the America perceives, what the law school teaches. It's bigger than the individual. It's the perception.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm getting now. And it's bigger than the individual. This is the perception we want America to have. This is what we teaching in schools, and this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
We're not going to fight specifically for the best interests of a man. We just want to get this done.
And I'm going and I'm going to validate what you said, but I'm also going to take it one step further. And I'm saying to the divorce lawyers who are listening, for those few individuals who are considering about where does this argument go in litigation, the argument has to be reframed from that perspective to give men a fighting chance in front of a jury or in front of a judge. And I'm certain in statistical purposes it happens, but I don't see it as a cultural narrative. I do not see that.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as the woman's narrative is going to win.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Now, I'm just assuming, and this is a learning process for me. This was the
Yes,
heaviest.
sir.
This was the heaviest chapter so far, and I'm very appreciative to be learning this. But why do you think that they want that narrative to exist, or can you assume you don't even if it's not facts or I'm just assuming also, but why do they want that narrative to remain?
Number one, it's the burden of divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Number one. Number two, it is how our society decided many, many years ago when this country was being built that this is the narrative that we're going to use, probably a little bit much after that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the narrative and this is how we're going to process stuff. Because divorce is not about two people deciding not to be married. Divorce is an industry. It's a business. It's a business. It's not just two people saying, you know what, this really isn't working out. How do we resolve this? Divorce is an industry.
So,
and if you understand that, then you'll understand why it is imperative for men, particularly divorce lawyers, to attempt to redefine the narrative that's being waged against men in the courtroom right now. And the playbook is just showing you how it's done. That's all it's done.
wow, man, this is really caught my attention on a deeper level, because when you get married, you in agreement to America's structure. You agree to the financial structure. You agree to capitalism, because majority of the time the woman is going to be a consumer. I'm not trying to assume about women though, but you agreeing to Christianity, you agreeing to the American structure if you accept being married. And then when you get a divorce, it's just the realization of all the things that you have contributed to. That's what it's starting to seem like to me. And this chapter is validating some things, and another perspective you gave. You talked about in the book explain to the audience the power of women being able to validate a man's life.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
that is powerful to me, because how my wife view me is how the world will view me from her perspective. Explain to the audience, help me understand that, like the power of women being able to validate a man's life.
I'll give you an example. In the case of a domestic dispute, not abuse, but a domestic dispute, where unfortunately, I don't know what the statistics are on how often 911 operators across the country, I'm pretty sure there's a database for that. But I would love to know the statistical breakdown of how many domestic disputes, not abuse, that's a different conversation, where a man and a woman cannot resolve a conflict. It could be a financial conflict, it could be a child conflict, whatever it is, where it's getting so out of hand where a police officer may have to be called. Okay? And when that situation happens, when the police arrives, if you're fortunate to live in the community, number one, let's make sure we establish that.
Yeah.
If you're fortunate enough to live in a community where that would happen, whose perspective are they looking after in the interest of when that call comes down?
I don't think we even got to say it. I don't even think we got to say it. You know whose perspective they're going to look at initially. They're going to side with the woman initially.
Yes, because the thought is the man has the potential to do physical harm to either the woman or a child on property.
Mm-hmm.
So to answer your question, this has been established. You are literally defined by what your wife says about you. And I didn't realize that until I was literally in that situation where I had supposedly a objective person who didn't know me,
Mm-hmm.
had no ability to judge my character, didn't know my accomplishments, didn't know my fears, didn't know my successes, didn't know my failures. But I had allegedly an objective person to evaluate me through not her eyes, but to the eyes of my wife.
Mm.
And I'm standing there vulnerable. And I'm thinking, why would you ask that question?
Yeah.
And that question floored me so bad because what you were doing, you were evaluating me not through your own individual eyes, but through the eyes of a woman who I'm having conflict with. And that's when I realized,
mm-hmm.
that we are not judged as men. We're not judged on the good things that we do. We're not judged on our fears, our apprehensions, our accomplishments, our failures, our fears. Mm-hmm. We're judged about what other women, particularly if you're fortunate enough to have a wife, mm-hmm. we're judged by her perception of you.
Mm. Now, what's crazy is that people who speak to the wife before they speak to the man has the decision-making power over the man when they
mm-hmm.
don't even know what he thinks, his ideology. They don't know nothing about the man personally. They just going off of what was said from the woman.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it does not matter.
That's crazy to give somebody power over you based upon a thought process that somebody else gave them. It's instead of an experience. Man. Man, that's powerful. The physical versus the mental level. The physical versus the mental leveling of the playing field. That is like major to me because both men and women have physical and mental attributes. Men may use one of the attributes more. Women may use another one more. But let's converse about the leveling of the playing field in those aspects.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I put that in there because there has been a historical belief that men are physically stronger. We have more physical dominant things that we have control over. Mm-hmm. We have the ability to do physical things that women cannot do, collectively speaking. Mm-hmm. And in order to level that playing field, the mental side of things, which is what this narrative is all about, mm-hmm. has been put in place to level that out.
Hold on. When you say put in place, go a little deeper for me, please.
It's what we've been talking about for the last 5 minutes, mm-hmm. which is that narrative, that ability to frame, reframe, that levels the playing field out. Mm-hmm. That is the equalizer. That has the ability to do harm, just as a man who's off of his emotional center has the ability to do harm to a woman, right? So that leveling, what I just talked about, is set up by the court systems to make sure that we're on a level playing field now. Now you, sir, you don't have all the power anymore. You don't have the economic power. You don't have the domineering power of your brute strength. We're going to reframe all of this, and we're going to get to a point of accountability for you, sir, mm-hmm. by letting the female have her narrative on how she sees you. Mm. That levels the playing field.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that, because women can never obtain the physical attributes, but men can obtain the mental attributes. You know, it's a saying that says women they mature faster than men. Is that just the
I would
saying?
agree with that.
You agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yes, I do. And then it gets to a point where it stops. But I do agree with that.
Okay, I do too, especially in the youthful age, the youthful
I agree.
ages. But when I think about this playing field or whatever, though, can't men like obtain the knowledge? How would we obtain the knowledge? How would we go about trying to mentally prepare ourselves? Or is that something? Is that even of our interest?
Let me ask you this. Take yourself 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If you were attempting to fight Mike Tyson 20 years ago, how would you do that?
It's impossible. 20 years ago, that's probably when he was fighting Lennox Lewis too. I probably have shot him. Not trying to mess the show up. I wouldn't go.
How would you attempt to fight Mike Tyson? How would you do? Explain that to us. We want to know.
It's impossible. It's
impossible.
Yeah, it's just impossible. I have to figure it out some other kind of way.
This playbook gives men the ability to do the impossible.
Wow.
That's what this playbook does.
Let's get on into it then, man, because us doing the impossible, the playbook is setting us up for success.
It's giving you a shot.
Yeah, because going into these things, I would assume that it seems like it's an impossible feat to get past, to get over, to win.
Do you know what we look at this? Look at the course that we have just passed. Look at the emotional overload. Mm-hmm. Look at the having a game plan. Look at where we are. We are trying to find a new place to live. We're trying to manage coworkers to stay out of our business. We're trying to deal with the financial aspect. We're dealing with so many small, lower fighters. Mm-hmm. We overlook the big one. And so the question that you just asked is the absolute reason why I wrote this. Because if you look at the outline on here, right, mm-hmm. Here are the things you are up against. You're up against a wife narration. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with a culture of blame. You're dealing with not just you and your wife and y'all's arguments. You're dealing with a culture that loves to blame men for the problems that women have in relationships.
Let's go deeper. That was one of my questions. The culture of blame. Let's go, because when I read that part in the book, that's off course for me in the questioning. But the culture of blame, I read that and I didn't have enough time to like process the culture of blame. I never knew that blaming was a culture.
If you look on there, it says now we're talking about guys who have affairs, guys who are engaged in criminal behavior, mm-hmm. guys who are responsible for domestic abuse, mm-hmm. guys who are responsible. I put them in that 20% category. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a culture where women now will blame the men for these social breakdowns. How many times on television, how many times on any kind of TV show do we hear a message that says women are also accountable, women are also guilty, women also have the ability to behave in similar ways? Mm-hmm. Those narratives do not go over well. Mm-hmm. So we live in a culture that loves to blame men for relationship problems.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with all of those. And when you put them together, wife narration, culture of blame, mm-hmm. the weaponization of the legal system, mm-hmm. all of them are set up for one thing, and that's to watch you break down.
All the way down. It's a super breakdown. Who would like who would want to implement this to see the man go through this many obstacles to get his life back after a commitment? Like, I wouldn't want
Yes.
to wish this upon nobody. After
Me
reading
neither.
this book, I wouldn't want to wish emotional control, cultural blame. I don't want to compete from the physical and mental aspect. I don't want to,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, need an audience to display my divorce to, or things like that. It's just a crazy space that a person have to be in to even create a system like this
Mm-hmm.
for lawyers to be able to engage in, women to be able to engage in, to see the sufferance of a man just go down like this. That's weird. That's weird to me, and it's something that
Well,
I'm learning.
for me, when I was exposed to this,
Mm-hmm.
I struggled accepting it
Mm-hmm.
because I gave lawyers more respect.
Then
I
they
gave more
deserve.
respect. Yeah, I did. I gave lawyers more respect. I gave the system more respect.
Mm.
But when the breakdown, when all of this goes into play, it's just like it's just like an offensive play in football, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a plan. You've got the quarterback who's clearly going to look for a wide receiver who's running a route. You've got to have blocking up front. You've got to have this deception by giving it to the running back. You have all these things that's designed to free this one guy open, and once he's open, boom, the pass goes directly to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the purpose of the playbook. But the playbook is designed to soften you up, to push your emotional limits at a certain level. And once that happens, we're then looking for you to break down. And break down looks like by folding the case, by not responding to emails, by looking for settlements prematurely, by just really taking a defensive posture. Because the primary goal on the other side, this is what we learned last week,
Mm-hmm.
is to get you to comply to whatever those demands are to reach a settlement.
Wow, you said I heard the word defensive, and I'm thinking like, is the man ever on offense? Can you think of an instance where a man could be on the offense?
He has the potential, but it's up to the lawyers. It's up to your lawyer. It's up to your lawyer that you choose, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Your lawyer. And if you don't know what I mean by that, I would offer you to go back and listen to the previous podcast.
Most definitely.
You have to pick the right lawyer. And you want someone who's not only intelligent and knows the law, but someone who has a proven track record of working with me,
Mm-hmm.
and also being able to rattle off statistics, trends in human behavior that promotes your behavior if you're in that 80%. Now, if you're in that 20%, where you got a wife, you got a woman on the side, you father children out of wedlock, sir, you're going to pay for your divorce.
Yeah, you done for.
You're done for.
You doing wrong. You're done for.
And that narrative hurts us all.
Yeah, that's true. Even the ones that's doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yes, it does.
What is your what would you assume, if you don't know? You may know this, but what would you assume the percentage is of lawyers speaking in the best interest of the man, fighting for? Because
I'll say this.
I'm curious.
I'll say this. I'll say this. When I got into this position, I did my homework. I did my homework on a particular firm that is known for this type of behavior. I went through several lawyers who were known to advocate for men. And I will say that I struck out 2 to 3 times looking for someone who's an advocate for men. So when you do your interview, you need to be able to ask pertinent questions.
Pertinent.
Yes. I would say it's probably about, in America, I made some mistakes. I would probably say it's less than about 5%.
Whoa.
Because when I asked that question, that's a great question that you asked, I got the traditional, well, justice is blind in America and we treat everybody the same. And I laughed at her. I said, ma'am, you and I know that's not true. Yeah. You and I know that the legal system is not a blind system. It is very much a system based on economics.
Yeah. That's all it's based on, really, to me.
Yeah.
Economics. Everything in America is based on economics. Yeah.
To answer your question, I'd say 5%. I think 5% will make themselves vulnerable in front of a jury or in front of a judge, and that's where you want someone that will make themselves vulnerable, personally vulnerable, by speaking on behalf of the rights of men in front of a judge, in front of a jury. That takes nerve. That's who you want.
You get one of them.
That's who you want.
You get one of them, you hit the lottery, because most people, like, the reason we get to this point in the first place, they look out for their best interest. They look out for what's going to do the best interest of them, how much money they can make, me being single and moving forward with my life. So me just thinking about a divorce in general, when I think about the lawyer, what lawyer going to put their career on the line to speak volumes and value into and about a person?
We're looking for an advocate. That's what we're looking for. I can use that word. We're looking for an advocate.
Okay. Let's move along in the conversation, because when they got acronyms for ego. I've read books, Ego is the Enemy. I done read so many books talking about the ego. When I first started researching and trying to become a better person, self-improvement books and stuff, the first thing it was talking about was ego.
Yeah.
And I read in your book where you said, ego, the bigger the ego, the bigger the legal expense. And that caught my attention, because I can see how that's possible. A person coming in and they cocky and they always right and they better than the other person, and stuff start getting exposed. and they start getting a little more and more humble, and then the finances start racking up and acting up, and that ego starts to diminish. But the bigger the ego, the bigger the legal expense. Help me understand that a little bit, Eric, please.
Goes back to our previous conversation about lawyers. I have found that the lawyers that have the big egos that will take over the courtroom, their egos are so big it may not fit in the courtroom. I have found that those are people not necessarily the most desirable, but if you get a lawyer who is aware of the playbook, who knows how to this is called gamesmanship. This is called gamesmanship, as we know about sports. And most guys, in this book, I do a lot of sports metaphors because I have learned that men, generally speaking, across the world, we speak sports. We have that lingo, and we can relate. The lawyers that have the bigger egos are the ones that you're going to have to pay because they know how to engage in gamesmanship at a level that you and I would be shocked.
Man, and when I was thinking about this, ego perspective. I was thinking about it as the client, not the lawyer. That caught me off guard.
I'm thinking about the lawyer.
Yeah, the lawyer having an ego. Wow.
Yes.
I wouldn't want
Yes.
an egotistical lawyer because I need an explanation. I need to know what's going to happen. If I hire
They will.
a lawyer, I want to know what they think. I want them to read the case before I hire them and tell me what they think they're capable of doing.
Yeah. That's a tough proposition. I wouldn't necessarily say, I put that in the book just because I wanted the guys to understand that if you come across a lawyer with a gigantic ego who may not be afraid to become an advocate if the situation changes, right? They may not have a problem with saying, well, Your Honor, this is a man who was able to overcome this. This is a man who's had a history of this behavior. That takes a lot of, it takes ego to be able to stand in front of a judge to become an advocate for you. That's who you're looking for. Mm-hmm. But that might cost you more.
Yeah.
Financially.
I think it would cost you more because an egotistical lawyer is going to be one that's overconfident. I would assume that.
Yeah.
He's overconfident if he wins or loses. He's overconfident. He thinks that he's capable of getting these things resolved. And that was an interesting read in the book about the ego.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Another thing, filing first, the advantages. We know the percentages. We've talked about them in previous chapters. If people haven't heard the previous chapters that we had a conversation on during the podcast episode, we talked about the 75-25, 80-20, when majority of women file for divorce first. But in this part of the book, you spoke about the value of the playbook is an advantage because women gain that advantage by filing first.
Yes. Yes.
Man. So that gives credence to all of the validation that we talked about previously.
Mm-hmm.
If she files first, they're gonna appreciate. Her narrative is gonna be the base of what they have before they even speak with you.
And I want to make sure that I address that because there's a couple big pieces that we're kind of overlooking.
Okay.
It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're all succinct with each other. They're all in motion with each other. Mm-hmm. But they're not to your betterment, though. They are to literally put you in a position where any negotiating power you have, you see, this is the part that we're not talking about. Your ability to push back, to counter, to all of those things, you're slowly getting pushed back on your heels because you're dealing with so many different weapons coming your way, and you don't even know it. You don't know it. You've already been stunned. You are literally fighting the greatest heavyweight champion in the world all in one. You got the stamina of Muhammad Ali. You got the jabs and the punching power of Mike Tyson. You got the height of George Foreman. I mean, you got everybody.
The defense,
because you're the defense. Mm-hmm. You're getting the best of the best, right? Because they know how this stuff works. So you have to find a way to understand what the moves are going to be before they come your way.
I want to read the 5 moves and let you continue on, because the 5 moves of the playbook is establish the victimhood narrative.
Yes, sir.
Establish a culture of blame.
Yes.
Weaponizing children.
Yes.
Weaponization of the legal system, and watch for your breakdown. God, that ending one was crazy. Watch for your breakdown. But the weaponizing of children, though, just continue on, Eric. I apologize. I'm learning right now.
No, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. All of those things are where you are going to be your most vulnerable, regardless of what you say or what you do. That's going to be the game plan, because the game plan is to win. It's to limit loss. It's to win. And how dare you even have the nerve to try to compete at that level? How do you even muster up? Now, some would say, I have a friend who's going through this right now, and I'm constantly trying to coach him to get him to take this seriously, but he is not taking it seriously. Mm-hmm. He is taking it from the amount of money I put in versus what I'm getting back in return. And I keep saying, you're going to lose with that perspective. Mm-hmm. You're gonna. It's not a matter of if you lose. You are going to lose with that perspective. So you're trying to figure out, how do I bring this individual down? You use a child, you use the court system, you use the legal system as a form of weaponization. You reject interrogatories. You say your evidence, your data collecting, that's not suffice. You want more data collecting. You want more returns. You want more information. That's called weaponization of the system. Mm-hmm. You ask for people who, if your judge, and I think we talked about this briefly, if your case is not resolved and you have to go to court, who would be the names of individuals that would have to be used in a court case? Who would you call as a defense on your character? All of these things are done. This is the heavyweight moment of the match here. This is the time when you're throwing blows. But before you get in the ring and that bell goes off, you've had 4 weapons lodged at you before you even start. Mm-hmm. So as a man, you got to, and you said them all correct, you got to understand how blame is used against you. You have to understand how the narrative is being used against you. She's filing first. You have to understand that children will, it's not a matter of if, children will be used against you, which rips a man's heart in half.
Man, I've said this on many podcasts, but this one is really hitting home. Like, I'm not asking you this. It's just that getting to the point to where it's a win-lose in a competitive situation. I haven't experienced that, but that's something that really is hard for me to compute right now and at this point in the book and at this point in my life. But I'm learning about it, and it's very intriguing to me that we get to, it's always like it's marriage is sort of like a business. It's always a win or lose or a competition situation or a financial situation. Who has the money and who doesn't, and who has this power and who doesn't. The American system is set up in a way that is I don't know if love and family structure is a beneficial thing. Like on episode 2, it was one point where you had talked about America looking weak. And I don't know if I'm saying this right. And I want you to help me. But America looking weak because of the amount of people that's getting married, the family structure. It's not like how it used to be. It's less.
It's declining. It's declining.
Yeah.
It's declining as a structure, as a civilization.
So it's noticeable that this structure and this system is a failing system. And people are going to stop contributing to it.
Yes.
Might not be in our lifetime, but people ain't going to continue to contribute to this 50 years down the line. It's no benefit, especially for a man.
And this is exactly why I have on, in the book I say, the primary reason this technique is effective is because it's hard to defend against what we cannot see. So these are actions that's done, that's thought about, that's going to put into motion once the divorce is started, once the legal fireworks, as I call it in this book, once that goes back and forth, and once we get into the actual nuts and bolts of it, which is what you started on, you can expect those types of exchange where your child will be used against you, where your financial situation will be used against you, where your legal proceedings will be used against you. I've got countless and countless stories from myself, as well as things that men have shared with you. Because again, I want to remind your listening audience, when I first wrote this book, I interviewed 64 guys.
Yeah.
And we talked about their divorce. We talked about their relationship. And I learned a lot about how their experiences were very much like mine. Mm-hmm. There were terms like parent alienation that I didn't know anything about until I started doing the research. And that's why I put them in the book. And I'll say this. Anytime you feel that this is too much for you to take on, that's when you need to call a TV timeout. And I urge every man to go speak with a mental health professional.
True.
I urge you to do that. Because if you don't, you're going to take on more than you can handle. No one's questioning your manhood. No one's pulling your man card. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm giving you some sound advice. If you get too much, call that TV timeout. Call it. Go talk to someone and get this out of your system so that you can move forward.
I like that you said move forward at the end, because it seemed like that's the main goal, to move forward. But seeking professional advice, oh man, that's, a lot of individuals, they don't want to go see a mental health person, or they don't want to go see a person to talk to, or pay that fee to talk to somebody, because a lot of people feel as if they don't need it, or they don't want to be exposed to their weaknesses and things like that. But I'm with you on that. I think that people should do that ASAP, because man, seeking help and assistance is a great thing. It's not a bad thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Assistance is needed in these aspects, because you got things hitting you from all different angles. For me reading this, it's like a nonstop punching bag. It's swinging at you.
You're getting hit from angles that you don't know exist.
Mm-hmm. I don't like, in my life, this question I'm about to ask you that I read from the book, I want to talk about me specifically for a moment, because this is strong. This whole paragraph is strong. Never let the other side define you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't like being defined by nothing, but I don't claim my job. I don't even like saying I'm a husband. I don't like attachments. That's what I would say, Eric. But when I think about this, I've agreed to this attachment, this marriage. I agreed to it. But when we are fighting for the win, and the other side is trying to define who I am, and they just going off of previous experiences, they don't really know who I am. That is crazy to me. And I want you to help me understand what that meant in the book's aspect, the definition of another person from the other side.
I will tell you with a degree of respect that I had that happen, where the opposing side. The other thing I will tell you, anytime you're inside of a divorce, you are legally required to read in. You're legally, how do I say it? You are going to get access to every email that goes between the lawyers. If they send an email to each other about anything, you're going to get a copy of that email. You're going to see everything. They're required to do full disclosure. And I had to make a tough decision. That decision was based upon all of the things that was defining me. I had to make one of the hardest decisions. I chose to go against what was expected of me, and I did something in my best interest. And the opposing side had some very harsh things to say about me and to say about my character. Mm. And I read that and I froze. And I said, I understand now. It hit me hard. I got the wind knocked out of me. That's not who I am. Anyone who knows me knows that's not who I am. Mm-hmm. But that's when I'm able to speak from not an experience of a theoretical, but I know what it feels like to have the wind knocked out of you. I know what that feels like.
That's hard to be on the defense and not being able to consider yourself. Am I assuming that right? Like, I'm on the defense, but I can't consider myself because it's going to look bad to the other side.
That's exactly, you have hit the nail on the head. This is the burden of divorce right here. Hold on, let me get this one out now. This is the burden of divorce. The burden of divorce says, if you think about yourself, your livelihood, your future interests, regardless of your stuff, you will be condemned and attacked. Your number one job is to be compliant. As long as you're compliant, the world is groovy. It's great. But there will come a time in your life, guys, when you can't be compliant. And when that day happens, you must be able to take the hit. You got to take the blows. But I'm here to tell you, just as when we were kids and we used to play football, and that guy would put that ball right in your stomach and you catch it and that wind get knocked out of it. Mm-hmm. And you lay down on the ground and somebody come and pull you up, you'll get back up on your feet. You will. Mm-hmm. You'll get back up on your feet, but man, does it hurt though.
Man, you
be ready for that.
I'm speechless now. Be
ready for it.
Man, I can't defend myself. It's crazy. You know, like when I think about that from a communication standpoint, communicating to the lawyer, what I'm trying to convey. Does honesty matter?
Honesty does not matter. It's not about whether I'm lying or whether you're telling the truth. It's about what I can show. What is my evidence to show anything? That's what it's about. Your character is part of what's on the front line. That's part of the playbook, is to get you broken down, get that emotional ability, get you off emotionally, get that riled up, go through your child, limit the amount of time until you get custody rights, talk about you in reference to your child where your child starts changing behaviors around you. All of those are things that are par for the course. Mm-hmm. And you will have women that will say, oh, that was just in your relationship. I love when they say that. That was just in your relationship. And true, my numbers are small. I only interviewed 64 guys. That is a very true statement. Mm-hmm. But I'm willing to bet you, look at the countless stories of men who all say the same thing. All I did in this book was to take their story, put it together, put it in a way that men can understand. Because, again, this is part of the book where you got to show up and you got to be mentally strong.
You know,
and if you don't think that matters, if you think that doesn't matter, You can look at Tom Brady, for instance.
That's the biggest. That's what matters the most. If a man hears this and doesn't realize that that's what matters the most, I don't want to say nothing negative. That's all I'm going to say.
You can't say anything negative. Now, I'm going to just say this because I know you got two more things you want to add. Mm-hmm. Look at the year that Tom Brady was going through his divorce. Tom Brady has the best of the best of the best. Whether you love him or hate him, that's not what we're talking about. We're not having the GOAT discussion here. We're just talking about the man, the entity, the enterprise called Tom Brady. Mm-hmm. He has the best of everything. Mm-hmm. Look at the year when he was going through his divorce. Mm-hmm. Look at the number of turnovers that Tampa had that year. Look at his interception ratio. Look at the he has the best. If that guy has struggling to perform his job, what do you think the masses of man are going to be able to do?
And what's crazy about that, he won a Super Bowl the year before that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And had the worst season of his career after that.
Yes. Yes.
And it wasn't because of football.
No, he had the same players. Mm. It was the emotional stuff that was going on. So my point again, guys, there is a playbook. There is a source of things that's supposed to make you compliant. You've got to make that tough decision about how you're going to stand in that courtroom and what you're going to face. This book, to me, is a way that I collected this information to give you a fighting chance.
And I hope the people stay in tune, the people that is enjoying this conversation, because we see we're building an audience that listens to this and they are enjoying it. And I know they're enjoying it, but by me looking at the average viewer time. And you talked about this a lot before I asked you this just now, but being easy to defeat when losing emotional control, because we've been speaking about emotional aspects and control and things like that, but the easy to defeat part,
very easy to defeat. You're very easy to defeat when your emotions are picked up. You're very easy to beat when you start talking about, potentially a new boyfriend on the setting or a new man in her life, or you talk about your child. You talk about your child being around another man who's not you, right? All of those things are the things that will pull any man off his center. It will pull any man off of his center. Mm-hmm. But that's what the playbook is designed to do. It's designed to get you to go right, and then we go left. That's what it's designed to do. My job as an author, I was told this, a good friend of mine prepared me for it. I was in shock. I'm still in shock that he was able to give that information. I just made it on a bigger level. But you are much easier to defeat. And what does defeat look like? Mm-hmm. Defeat is you're going to go by my terms, not by your terms, not by our terms.
Yeah.
The terms will be dictated to you if you are much more in a weakened position.
You're going to do this, that, and that, and you don't have no choice.
But you got to be broken down, though. You got to keep that in mind. You have to be broken down. And there's a system to break you down. But you got to be broken down first.
I'm speechless. I think that this, we're going to go to chapter 6 after this episode. And I got one more question to ask you. But I think that
yes, sir.
I really do think that if the viewers are watching this podcast and you're thinking about purchasing this book, this is a chapter you need to read multiple times. And this chapter is a chapter that we could do multiple episodes on, to be honest with you. And we could even do a bonus episode after we're done with this chapter, because it's more to it.
Yes, especially the interrogatories. especially the interrogatories. The interrogatories are, that's another conversation. But yes, go continue.
Yeah. So I want to read a part of the book.
Yes.
To the people, and it's a sports analogy. You say in this book, furthermore, I want to reveal why the playbook is effective and why men must understand why this move is hard to detect and defend. The answer is simple to understand, and in the words of Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And the playbook is a punch out of nowhere. Gentlemen, regardless of your sport, most of us would agree with the idea of the challenge in defending what you cannot see coming. On the field, court of play, remember, lawyers are training to represent their clients' interests. And when negative fallout of divorce happens, recovery going to happen on your dime. And counseling from a professional therapist. Now, I will reveal the aspects of the playbook, and here are the 5 moves, which we already talked about, but I'm going to read them to y'all again, and we're going to close out. Establish the victimhood narrative. Establish a culture of blame. Weaponizing children. Weaponization of the legal system. Watch for your breakdown. Hey, that's all that I needed to say, fam. What do you have to say in closing, Eric? And I highly appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you for taking the time to let this podcast get produced. You do a phenomenal job at asking really good, thought-provoking questions. This particular chapter was one that I wrote under a lot of pressure, but I wrote it with the hopes that one day someone would see it, and someday it may help a man to get himself up off the ground.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time also. I appreciate you. And to the people that is viewing this podcast, go purchase the book, man, please. And also, we'll see y'all next weekend. We highly appreciate y'all. Thank you.
The Trevor Jackson Podcast.